Hello, hello. It's Lynn Horde here, the Joy Coach, back for day 7 of the Joy Challenge. If we've not met before, as I said, I'm the Joy Coach. I support people to tap into their highest joy, harness it, and use it to transform their lives, create more connected relationships, create more fulfilling work, and create a happier, better world. So today we're back for day 7, the final day of the Joy Challenge. And today we're talking about surrender, the practice of surrender. This is actually not a topic that I have talked a lot about before, but it was something that I learned a great deal about on my cancer journey. So I'm going to tell you a little story about that today and the pivotal moment that really brought me to an embodied understanding of what it meant to surrender. Now, I don't know about you, but when I first encountered this concept of surrender, I was like, well, what does that mean? Does that mean I go all floppy and I give in and I just accept, what is present in my life right now? Does it mean I don't desire anything else anymore? And I don't know, and when I remember first coming across this idea, I was like, well, that sounds a bit sucky. I don't want to just have this be my life. I want more than this. And so that was my first experience of surrender, and I didn't quite get it. As I went down the path of self-development even further, I got to understand, that part of surrender was showing up. So showing up to kind of what was present for you in any given time. When I started my cancer journey, when I started my treatment, I set the intention and I really made a promise to myself that I was going to show up each and every day to whatever emotions, whatever treatment, whatever obstacle or joy was in front of me on the day. And to be honest, on a journey like that, that's all you can really do, is just keep showing up every day and being with what is there. But what I remember was the third part of my treatment was actually radiotherapy. So I had chemotherapy first, then I had a operation, and then after the operation and reconstruction surgery, I was then told you need to have radiotherapy because I had several tumors in my breast, and they said, given their location and their size, we think you need to do this just as a kind of preventative measure. And the doctors, and I made sense, like it made logical sense. I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. Now, what I didn't, so I thought I was on board. So, we'll do radiotherapy for 15 days altogether. And about day 3, I remember lying on the table. And I was lying there, so you're naked from the waist up. You're in a room that's very clinical. There's nobody in there when the machine starts, and there's this massive machine kind of like going around you and giving you the radiation treatment. And I remember lying there and I was really in resistance. I was in internal conflict about having to do radiotherapy. And, looking back, what I realized was I was trying to be really positive. I was trying to be really mentally strong. But what I didn't realize was actually I didn't know why I was doing the radiotherapy internally. So logically, I got it. But I was concerned because they tested my tissue after the operation and I was cancer-free before the operation. So all the chemo had killed the cancer, which was brilliant. But that meant on the radiotherapy table, I was in my mind going, well, does that mean I'm doing myself more damage? Do I have to be doing this? Like, am I causing myself future harm? And I was just in such internal conflict. And I'm sure you've probably experienced that before. You're doing a thing, but you're not really on board with it, and it creates anxiety. It creates like internal conflict, internal resistance. So in that moment, because I hadn't been admitting to myself, the thoughts and the feelings that I'd been having, because as I said, I was trying to be strong. I was trying to be mentally strong. But what I realized was, I was like, I just can't do this. I'm just going to have to admit to myself, what I'm feeling. So as I'm laying on the table, I'm upset, the tears are running down my face, and I was able to sit there and actually, verbalize in my head what I was feeling. I was like, I don't want to do this. I'm not sure why I'm doing it. this really sucks. I'm worried that I'm going to be causing myself some future harm. So, I was able to actually mentally say all the things that I'd been avoiding saying to myself because I was trying to be positive and strong. Now, whilst I was doing that, I was tapping. I don't know if you've ever heard of that technique, but it's called tapping, the EFT, Emotional Freedom Technique. Anyway, it's brilliant. I used it all throughout my cancer journey, and it was an absolute godsend. Anyway, you can tap on the edge of your fingers, and it helps release emotion. It brings your emotions, down, and helps release them. Anyway, I'm on the table. I'm doing the tapping, and saying these things in my mind. And what happened next was pretty incredible. So as I said, I was laying there thinking to myself all of the reasons why I didn't know why I was there. I was like, I'm not sure this is the right thing. And eventually, once I had said all of the things that I'd been avoiding, said them into my head, it was like the clouds parted. It was actually pretty extraordinary. So it was like, so the conflict, the resistance to being on the table had caused like internal emotional conflict, like anxiety, and it had caused confusion in my brain. And through the tapping and through the actual saying what I was feeling and thinking, it was like the clouds parted in my brain, and in popped a reason for why I would continue, why I should be doing, or why it would be to my benefit to do the radiotherapy. And it was like I could hear it in my head and just said, Lynn, you're doing this to ensure you have a future. And I was like, oh, I can get on board with that because I want a future. I want to live a long life. So it was a really extraordinary moment. And when I sat on my couch later and really thought that process through, what I realized was essentially what I'd done in the moment was surrender. Surrender my resistance. Now, what was I resisting? The truth of how I was feeling and thinking. So I'll say that again because sometimes people are like, well, what does this whole surrender thing mean? And this is for me what I have discovered it means. Surrender is surrendering our resistance to the truth that we're not facing, the truth of our feelings, the truth of what we're really thinking, the truth of what we want, our desires, as well as the truth of what we don't want. So all of these things, sometimes we don't, they might sit over in our periphery, but they don't necessarily sit, we don't necessarily face them. So it's, asking the question, what is the truth that I am resisting? And for me, that's what surrender is about. Facing that truth and then experiencing the feelings that come with that, because that's also one of the reasons we often avoid facing our truths, because we don't want the emotion, we don't want to feel the emotions that might be associated with that truth. Now, surrender is a practice. So this is, being able to do this is something I've been working on a long time. And how does it fit in with joy? Why am I talking about it on the Joy Challenge? Because ultimately, when we're in resistance, we are unable to experience joy because that resistance creates internal conflict. It creates, as I said, anxiety or nervousness or worry or stress or confusion. So that conflict itself, the internal conflict or the mental conflict, creates that dissonance in our body. And whilst we're in that state, we're unable to move through to those places of clarity. Because what happens often when we actually sit and face our truth, feel the feelings that come with it, is we do break through to the sunshine. It's like, in that moment with my mind, the clouds parted. And I do this technique, on a regular basis now myself. Like in the morning, if I've woken up not feeling great, I'll sit on the couch and go, well, what's going on there? What's the truth of what I'm feeling or thinking? And when I sit with it and admit the truth to myself, I will often, the emotions leave and I feel this state of calm and peace and ease within me because I'm not in resistance anymore, because I said the truth to myself. And that's a really important thing to remember. This doesn't mean that we're out there, this truth is about you, about your truth, the truth of how you feel, what you want, what you don't want, what you are thinking. And that's the very first place we always have to start is, what is your experience, what's going on inside of you. And this is a really, so this idea of surrender, this practice of surrender, is an ongoing practice that is part of bringing more joy into your life. It's about looking at those places that we're resisting, facing those truths so that we can break through to the sunshine. We can part our own internal clouds, so to speak, and feel the light, the joy, the peace, the contentment that we want. And again, this isn't necessarily easy and it isn't necessarily that fast. That's why I call it a practice, because it takes time to build that up. Obviously, it takes time if you're not accustomed to facing your own internal truths. That's why I'm calling it a practice. So that's the one. That's one I wanted to finish on today. So day 7 of our joy challenge, I wanted to talk about the technique or the tool that is surrender. So we're surrendering the resistance to the truth. So it's like, what is the truth that you're not facing? And that as a process, like the better you get at it, the faster you get at it, the quicker you can move through to those states of contentment, ease, peace, bliss, and joy that you are desiring. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this particular tool and technique. Again, it's not something that I've actually talked about out in public before. This is a new one that I learned a great deal about, as I said, on my journey. So I'd love to hear, do you already do the practice of surrender? What does that look like for you? Is it different, to how I have experienced it? So I'd love to hear your thoughts below. And if you've enjoyed this and you'd love to continue the conversation of how to bring more joy into your life, I'd love to invite you into my Facebook community called Ignite Your Joy. It's for leaders, trailblazers, entrepreneurs, business professionals, basically people who want to tap into their highest joy, who want to discover how to live with more joy so that they can create more harmonious relationships, more fulfilling work, and ultimately a happier world, which is what we can ultimately do when we're all bringing more joy into our own lives. So thank you very much for joining me today and for this 7-day challenge. The posts will remain here if you want to catch up, and it's also over on my YouTube. I'll put a post in the comments below for the Ignite Your Joy community, and hopefully I'll see you in there if that resonates with you. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you back on my page here next week. Bye for now.